there, can't you?
So we are live.
Good.
And as promised, in the 5G Land Rover, even though, and it is 100% powered by the solar on the roof. However,
Really?
It's not going over private 5G at the moment, but it will be in the next one. Just got to do these things. You can't do everything in one go. If you give, it's just got to do things by parts. And it was choosing between having a coffee. So, who wants to kick off today's exciting?
Well, tell us a little bit more about the 5G in the Land Rover. That's what we want to know.
So this is actually I'm streaming this from the tablets where normally you control it. So there is an amazing dashboard where you can basically see everything that's going on. The antenna mast goes off of the back. The solar is all along the roof, and the Starlink can either be on the bonnet or here above where the sunroof is. Seems a shame to not have the sunroof though. It's a bit of a nod. It's always quite nice to have a sunroof. It's another place to leak in a Land Rover. And it's a very nice place to be. Obviously, one of the things that people forget is that in modern cars, you can't actually sit and do things, but I'm even in the driver's seat now and I can actually sit and do some work. We've had up to 4 people in this vehicle doing work when it's been tipping it down on IoT products in the field. And you just can't do that in other vehicles. So and obviously it was called the best 4x4 by far. And I might see if I can link in here those wonderful videos that you see of a Land Rover pulling. Wherever I've been, whether it's been sand, mud or whatever, there's always been a Land Rover pulling out another SUV or 4-wheel drive. But so that's the capable one. And we are making, obviously there's an electric one, but a hybrid one is probably more useful because we can, if we need to, we can power the radio, etc., for prolonged periods in British summertime, which means no sun for pretty long periods. And we can use hydrogen in the future with petrol engines. So we're converting those quickly to diesel and petrol hybrid, as well as EV. And then we have the small EVs, obviously, which are quite cool. And one of these will do from the small EVs. Who knows, we may even all be in the little EVs in one of these videos. That's
really cool, wouldn't it?
It would be, yeah. And what is quite amazing is, and there is going to be a coffee machine as well. So this one I grabbed from inside, but in the next one, I will, make because they are, of course, also e-cargo bikes and vending products. So you can actually sell coffees from them, etc., which is quite an important thing that we'll get onto in another topic. I don't want to carry on rambling on about things that we can't really show yet, but we will show them in other ones. But coffee is here in this one, and it is just a lovely space to be. I don't know how. I know obviously people are walking down the street thinking I'm completely weird, and possibly am in the street next to our offices, but I don't care. This is just a lovely place to be. And another little known fact is that you can actually sleep in these. So there is basically a hammock that you can stretch from the front all the way to the back, and you can. And I don't know if you can see. You probably can't pick up some of the. So the solar comes in back there, and is routed into the main batteries. There's all batteries along the floor. There's some people have tried to do a Land Rover 5G before, but they put everything on the roof, and the Land Rover doesn't really need weight up top any more than it already has. And if anything, what we're doing is making these out of composite and bringing the weight down, and obviously putting all the batteries down in the chassis as a pure hybrid to make it more stable. And that's not just important to be more stable as a vehicle, but also to be able to deploy quickly. You need, we can't get into that until we've patented it, etc. But there are reasons for it. But anyway, I've already rambled on for 5 minutes of a 30-minute show.
So Christian, how many patents do you think that will register
that's
this particular solution before we
13 and a quarter.
See, 9 3/4, but anyway.
It's a constant. It's a constant battle. Actually, I said, having said I mean, we do complain, don't we? We've had the wettest time when we're trying to do site visits with this. Literally, some of the places, the only place you could get into was with the Land Rover, and of course, we now complain that it's too sunny. But in terms of pants, there are a lot, and we can't get into that probably until we've done it. And some of them are combined, and it's quite a long process. But it's part of the DSIT Open RAN funding was to patent a load of technologies, which obviously is a typical thing when you go through these processes. And it's not just for the sake of it. Obviously, there's a lot of important innovation that's going into being able to deploy quickly, move quickly, and be mobile, sustainable. And it's all the way through, from the masts, the construction materials of the masts, the vehicle, where there's a lot of innovation and time and effort's been put into everything from end to end, including the 10 years ago we started making fully cloud mobile cores and saw the energy efficiencies we could do, where we first knocked a zero off of the power consumption, and then we've knocked nearly another zero off of power consumption of a million MVNO subs. We're now doing that in the private space, and you need that. That is the only way, because you see some of the other solutions, they're trying to put hydrogen generators, which they're great, but they just up the weight. And then if they need to go on a trailer, and if you've got a heavy trailer, I don't know if anyone's, I mean, the ideas of a trailer is fantastic, but the reality of a trailer is that they're a nightmare even for a Defender off-road. If you try and go down a grassy hill, it'll try and overtake you and roll you. Trailers basically try to kill most drivers at any given point. But also, it's not 100% renewable. Now, we're getting to this stage where renewable has to mean renewable. It doesn't mean planting more trees or offsetting or putting your dirty energy elsewhere. It's about making it renewable. And so these will be 100% renewable. The one thing that we do get into sort of discussions with people is why it's hybrid. And the reason why we have the hybrid Defender is because even in the middle of Wales, in the Welsh desert, there will never be charging infrastructure for an electric Land Rover. And so if you need to cover an event or have something in the middle of a place where there is no charging infrastructure, then you're going to need to have it fully sustainable. And then there's all the other stuff that comes off of that. So we've developed all the tracking as well, so we can actually monitor real time the different battery chemistries, where they are, how they are, what's being used inside the vehicle. So we've got some very low power HVAC to basically. One of the big problems with EVs is obviously if you have 3 vans delivering in London, and one person has their heating turned up, the other one has their aircon on, and the other person doesn't, they will get vastly different ranges. And so obviously HVACing a vehicle this big is quite difficult, but in the small EVs it's very, very easy, because the volume is about a third of what we have here, and there isn't a huge amount of glass, and it's all made of more modern materials that are more thermally efficient. But it's there's unfortunately it's like everything, right? I mean, sustainability, we look at it in parts at the moment. So we're all massive on recycling, which is one thing, but you've got to look at the whole picture. And so making these sustainable vehicles, we've had to look at everything from how they're made, how heavy they are, where that weight, if there is any, is, how able they are to go off-road, because again, a trailer or a van with 5G in is fantastic in a nice dry field, but even in dense urban environments, we've seen vans get beached on even curbs, let alone roundabouts. Anyway, so we have sorry, is there anyone
question for you? Do you think there is an approach which is not a magic bullet approach to solving the not spots or events, high density flows, traffic? So for example, where there's decent access, a trailer solution may well suffice, but actually when you're in a smaller event where I guess the retailers, they want connectivity to take payments electronically, etc., an e-cargo bike will only suffice, because having weight, etc., getting into a field is a problem. Whereas an e-cargo bike will be able to be nimble and get to where it needs to get, and setup is very quick, as is the takedown. Do you think there's a market for both of those, or do you think that the trailer really doesn't work in most scenarios?
Like everything, there's a market for everything. Apologies, I missed part of that because, unfortunately, when you're in a Land Rover, a classic Land Rover Defender, people want to come and tell you that they like your car. But the different vehicles have different needs, and so from the ground up, we wanted to make the Land Rover more sustainable, and so the whole longer, bigger process of this is to make basically e-cargo bikes, or much smaller, lighter vehicles, because even if you electrify a vehicle, the big problem in a dense urban area like we are now in central London is the fact that this vehicle takes up 10 to 15 square meters. This is actually quite small because it's an old classic vehicle. It's only 1.8 meters wide and 4 point some meters long. Most modern vehicles are 2+ meters wide, and they cause congestion, and the massive weight needs energy just to move them, plus the energy to brake them, brake pads, even tire wear, etc., and even damage to the roads, which all so in the short, the vast majority of, if you can do a journey in a much and transport essentially 100 kilos of cargo and human, whether it be on Amazon deliveries or Waitrose deliveries or providing a service for private 5G in a field, if you can do that in a much lighter vehicle, then fantastic. And the knock-on effects we've seen from that are many folds. So now we're even going into agri-tech, because a lot of the solutions require a tractor, and a tractor compacts the ground, basically makes a mess of any field that it goes through. And whereas our vehicles are light and they won't make a mess, and we've seen this on even the project that we're in that these vehicles can go into a lift, they can go into heritage sites, they've got big fat tires, all-wheel drive, and so they can go up curbs and across old stone ruins without actually damaging them. However, good luck driving an e-cargo bike 400 miles to an event. I mean, it can be done, but it feels a little bit like going back into the past, and it isn't really an efficient way of doing it. And also the cargo that you can have. So there's 10 kilowatt hours in the small e-cargo bike. We can get up to 40. Well, I mean, we can even have 100 kilowatt hours in the Land Rover. But obviously, then you get into the problem of the fact that you have so many batteries that if you're not traveling a long distance, you're wasting so much energy just to transport the batteries. It's a bit like us carrying a house around to go to the shops.
Yeah.
But I don't know if I've answered your question, but I mean, is there a use for a trailer? Yeah, if you want to go and put a trailer up a month before and leave it with hydrogen for a year, then fantastic. But I think there are so many network in a box solutions, and I think even when we're doing this, DCIT said the last thing we need is another network in a box, or one that pretends to be mobile and isn't. And so what we have so far is people putting 5G in a van, and yes, it's mobile in that you can move it, but it isn't. You can't. If you can get it into an event like Glastonbury before the event's happened, after 200,000 people have trodden it around in wellies and spilled beer on it, it could take you another 3 months to get it actually out of there. And so the vehicles are both four-wheel drive and can go through things. I think you have to be realistic, even though they are light and four-wheel drives and they're much more capable in some areas, they're less capable in others. A Land Rover can get through many things. I personally would like to make a Unimog, for example, which could go even further, but the problem is the use cases, right? And I think this comes back to answering your question in the short way, whereas you've basically it's about how many use cases you solve. And for a mobile network, I believe that a trailer is so heavy and so cumbersome and takes so long to deploy and put in place that it only serves for a small percentage of the use cases. What we do with the Land Rover and the e-cargo bike is solve, I think, I mean, you've seen from what we've been doing with DCIT, we solve pretty much every scenario. We haven't got a mast. We haven't got planning for a mast. We can only get a temporary license. We need to, someone's put a Ferris wheel in front of where we put the old mast, and it's blocking the signal to 50% of the site. And we'd have to clear the site of all the people who've paid money to go there in order to move it, so we can't. All of these things mean that between these two vehicles, we cover, I think, I don't know what the number is, because I know people pull these numbers out of the air and it sometimes annoys me, but let's do one. 90% of the scenarios, whereas a trailer or a van, I think, will do 5, 10, and you can adapt them, of course. If you've, it's like everything, right? If you've if the only vehicle that you've got is a van, then you use it. But getting across a muddy field in a van is not an easy thing. And people think, well, obviously the biggest problem of covering with private 5G is the rural areas, right? Generally, within central London, you've got to have a massive event like the Olympics to bring the network down. But you still have situations where events where people want to have wireless, and again, even then, if you have the situations like when there was the coronation, there were areas where you wanted to move across the the Mall, where is the Mall or Pall Mall, I can't remember, apologies, but the only way to actually do that easily was to go up the stairs. And in a Defender, you can go up the stairs. People probably wouldn't want you going up the stairs in a 2-ton Defender. But in the e-cargo bike, because it only weighs 100 kilos, it won't damage any infrastructure going up the stairs, and it can go up the stairs and go to another part without having to go all the way around a cordoned off. So I don't know if that's a very long answer to a very short question.
It answers the question. I mean, it brings into focus, some of the news this week. I think the FCC in the US, very different use case, because they've got 14 million homes and businesses that's not got 5G coverage, and most of those just don't have coverage, full stop. It's very obviously rural. We're in the UK, and in the UK we've still got a lot of nut spots, and DCs etc. have stipulated within the next 3 or 4 years they're going to have 95% 4G coverage at least. I mean, good luck with that under the rural initiatives. But from an American point of view, they're going down the route of forcing the MNOs to do the coverage, and they put this week they've announced a further $9 billion worth of funding, of which 900 million is Open RAN approach, which begs the first question: why only 10% is Open RAN? Given the issues we know about it, but anyway, but equally, they're still looking at old school type planning to get this done, not cheaper versions. And I use the word cheaper in inverted comments, but different solutions, and by extension, not using some of the big old school RAN providers is cheaper, and
cheaper electricity, cheaper total cost of ownership.
So it begs the question: why would they do that? Because the FCC and many things are not stupid.
No, but they have to play a balancing act, I think, is the nice way. So I think it's very clear that a lot of the equipment that we have, the easiest analogy, I think, is just to take it that it's like trying to travel by British Airways everywhere. They're fantastic, or United or Lufthansa or whatever. Choose your airline. It's great for getting you across half of the world, but it's terrible at getting you from Heathrow to your hotel in central London. Obviously not going to do that in a plane, but if you've got somebody who is from an airline who's used to the logistics of getting 400 people from Dubai to Heathrow and ask them to try and arrange, it's not going to work. And I think that's essentially the problem with the network operators, is that they're clearly focused on getting something that has, I mean, you saw even when we had the launch of this DSIP competition, there was a network operator there going, what about the 99.59s? And it's like, well, what's the point? I mean, at Glastonbury, two network operators had a 5 nines network, and they both went down when Elton John got on, and they'd argue, yes, but it's still 5 nines. It was still up. It's just no capacity.
It's not when you
What's
need
the point? I mean, people just want to be able to have connectivity, and that's, I think, the thing of the events. You know, if you're trying to stream the broadcast, or you're trying to enable people to pay for their, for their services that they're eating, or make sure that the ambulances are connected, you just can't. The 5 nines but no capacity doesn't really cut it, and that's the problem. So basically, the FCC have to they can't go and say our CTO knows more than your CTO. The network operators are focused on rolling out a service that will have 5 nines for 90x% of the population. The problem is, and I think this is one of the things that, there's two things, right? One of them is that and this is where, I mean, and James Bodie said fantastically, we don't care about 5 nines. We'd even be happy with a 9. And I think the same was with when we launched this program. It was Peter, wasn't it? Peter Gradwell was basically saying, for decades now, the fixed incumbents have been promising rural connectivity, and they don't deliver it. And the only time they'll ever deliver it is if a bunch of people raise enough money to try and do it themselves, and then miraculously they'll turn up and cover that town. And the same with the mobile networks. They just haven't covered the area. And I think that in the olden days of 98% coverage, it's let a lot of people down. And this is what we're seeing, even in places like Bristol and Oxford and Cambridge. We're not talking about the Outer Hebrides. We're talking about big cities. People are listed between, we just about have coverage unless there's an event, no coverage, and not a chance. And we need to connect these situations, and they're not as permanent or as flexible as, and I think the airline business is good there. You know that if you have a jumbo with 500 places, it doesn't matter who you're filling it with. It may be full of English people one day, people from the United Nations another day, etc. You'll fill it. But in the middle of nowhere, it's quite hard, right? And whether it's a restaurant, whether it's whatever it is, it's very hard to fill. And so the unpredictable nature of these networks means that you need lighter and more flexible solutions. And the fact that we're having to get into our heads the fact that there's no point having an expensive network in a beach area when it's only being used 6 months of the year. You should have something that you can ship there to be used for when people are actually at the beach, but then the rest of the time it can be used in the winter for floods, for snow, for all sorts of natural disasters that happen. And that flexibility is just not there in these big products. And then you've got to add the sustainability side of it. So the fact that we are decentralizing technology, the fact, a central HSS and everything coming back to the same IP, etc., just doesn't hack it anymore. If you are decentralizing, and we are decentralizing, we're decentralizing our electricity. The old electricity was based on having 1 gig distributed around the whole country. We're now realizing that you can't do that anymore. And the same with the networks. It's a natural process of decentralizing, for want of a better word. But the FCC are very, they're brilliant. But you've still, I do not envy them that job of fighting with people who've never been fired for buying IBM, is the old analogy. And it's not just 1 or 2. You're fighting an army of people who've never been fired for buying IBM, and it'll be like pushing cats up ladders with water whilst herding. It's just all the analogies of kill me. Anyway, so sorry, that was we've wrapped up pretty much the whole session on private 5G, and but I think it's a worthy subject.
No, it is, and without and a shameless plug to come, we've got a minimum of 10 events to prove the different use cases and spikes in volume of traffic, etc., over the summer. Some will be extremely lumpy and extremely spiky, where you'll get a lot of people in a short period of time, and then the event is over, almost a day's event, and then others we run a showground and it's 3 days and people are staying overnight, where you've got to be up for 72 hours, etc. So that'll be interesting. There'll be a lot of fine tuning, and I was
be able to move it around. Right? And this is, I think, one of the other things is that you can move it around. So in the showground, we can be at the gates where people are being checked in. We can then be where the vendors are during the day, and then we can be where the people are during the evening. Whereas before it was always a compromise, right? You'd stick it in the middle and hope it worked. And if need be, we can send some more, which is always a good option. So yeah, I think it's one of the other things I wanted to get. I don't know if anyone else wants to cover this a bit more, or should we go into some of the other topics which were quite.
Well,
one of them that I found quite amusing
with the new cargo bikes and the trackers in particular was potentially at these events very small and nimble sort of first aid type scenario. So it's not really a 5G network, but it's an e-cargo bike with trackers, that can scoot through a crowd pretty quickly with first aid equipment or something. If somebody has a stroke or whatever. It was, it's not, unfortunately, it's not 5G, but it's something that's really helpful.
Without giving too much away, they are. And I think one of the things that we started putting trackers in everything, including the CPEs and the UEs, the end user equipment, and the Wi-Fi and other equipment, mainly to assist with our AI. And I was going to go onto AI because everybody, it seems like CES and MWC, everything had to be AI-ified. But these are being actually AI'd. So there are some pretty interesting 360 camera in every one of the vehicles, which is counting crowd movement, looking at crowds, identifying movement, but also we're looking at how people are moving through the events to look at flows and to help us be able to maximize the power efficiency needed for future events, but also the flow and where they need to be at what time. And that AI, I think, is going to be massive, and that's where we haven't even started. And I think this is what's going to make the FCC's, to come full circle, job a lot easier, right? So, I mean, we had a constant battle before with IoT, where a lot of people in network operators believed that even in a place like the US, which is massive, let alone in the UK, had universal coverage. And all that would do is mean that 5, 10, 20% of their vehicles that didn't have coverage, they'd just go to another supplier. And this created a terrible circle, right? Because if 80% of your fleet is Vodafone and 20% of your fleet is T-Mobile will spend all of their time trying to get the Vodafone business. And it's just anyway. And the way that you prove this is with facts. And so we were able to prove that these X amount of SIMs were not having service at X point. And this is why we had to have them being multi-IMSI or multi-network or with another network, etc. And I think this is the way that the FCC will be able to prove, we're going to have actual real facts of how much power was used in high density environments. And this is why, obviously, the British government has invested specifically in high density use cases, is to turn this whole argument on its head, where they basically say, this is one guy in a field. It's like, no, we actually managed to, and and the same with as we saw in various events last year, the main MNO event, the cell will go down because it is a big cell that is, no matter how big it is, if enough people descend on it, it will fall over, because you can't dimension customers per site. And the only way to really dimension customers per site is by having a small cell there, where either the operator is dimensioning it per site, or that site dimensions it for you, because it's either Mocken or you've roamed onto it, or it's a neutral host network. But and again, a lot of those scenarios, they're insisting at the moment that a lot of the Open RAN and neutral host networks, they're not quite as expensive as the big boys, but they're still quite expensive, and it's not on the open networks. And I think one of the things that we'll be proving is that with the pure open networks that cost another factor less, use another factor less energy, and have a much smaller footprint, can can power all of these scenarios, enable people to still be selling, enable people still to be safe, and when a child gets lost, they don't bring the network down trying to find them over the CCTV. We can just find them or track them, and that will be the AI element. And obviously that is going to be quite. I find it fascinating, and it's
Yep. So
as you can tell.
And I think on that note, we're out of time.
We are out of time, and
already.
we were. There's so many other things we wanted to get onto. I love the way, just talking about AI quickly as we wrap up, and we'll have to do this on the next one. But I do love that Apple abandons its car allegedly, but announces AI. And apparently all the people who were working on the Apple car for the last decade have now been shifted over to AI. But it may sound like they're jumping from one bandwagon to another, but there is actually, as we've seen, a huge amount of synergy between those two. And so don't assume that they cannot revive the IA. I think, Carl, you were looking at the Orange and MásMóvil deal.
Yeah, and the three Vodafone implications, and there's actually European implications on those, but I think that's a whole topic in itself. So probably one better for next time.
Yeah, it's a long discussion, that one, isn't it?
It is. Well, I mean, the problem with competition law as well is what's ideal competition and what's best for actually the consumer. But Singtel have got a green strategy, which I think ties into what we'll follow on with as we start. And we will start circulating a lot of the facts of how many watts per consumer is used for doing a lot of these calls. Spain is buying back shares in Telefonica after I think the Saudi was it the Saudi
interest?
Yes, it's I mean, there is a lot of national security benefits from Open RAN and what we're doing in this. If I don't think any of the recent events can stress enough how important it is to have people being able to quickly put up infrastructure, whether it's for the pandemic or for other events that I don't want to go into. And there's 1 billion 5G users in China.
Is there really?
I remember it's not. I mean, we're probably showing our age, but I remember when there were only 1 billion people in China, and there are now 1 billion people with a 5G phone or 5G connection of some form.
Well, they must obviously start very young, because I think, isn't the Chinese population one of the ones that is dwindling fast, like the Japanese population? Yeah, there's not enough young people anymore.
China, well, there isn't. I mean, obviously the problem is, I mean, we have an aging population, but that's probably an easier issue to deal with than a population that's outgrowing its resources. But I mean, one of the things that shocked me incredibly is the ability of when I was in South Korea, of how we have almost a stigma in a lot of Western society about being a geek and being that doesn't exist. You have 6-year-olds who can reprogram. If you leave a unprotected laptop in a conference, it will be doing something else very quickly. But I don't know how. I think you can probably there's the population has significantly grown from 1 billion, so it could be 1 billion older people. And obviously don't forget all the connected things that there are in China as well. It's probably quite conservative. But on that note, we probably do really have to end this one now, don't we?
Yeah.
And what will be the surprise next week? It's there will be something different. I think we will have to do something more vehicle related. But this is this is me reporting from.
You'll have to do it from the top of the car park or something, or out in the field, out in the middle of a field, not in the city.
We are going to be doing one from a middle of a field, inevitably, because we will be covering so many events that we'll have to. But yes, I think that will be one of them that will prove, and more places on the top of a mountain, probably even on a ferry in the middle of the ocean or sea. The possibilities are endless.
You're planning a booze cruise, are you?
Sorry?
You're planning a booze cruise.
Yes, that's I was one of those sort of geriatric cruises. I think would probably suit me.
What about a Grand Prix at Silverstone or something? Huge crowds, 200,000, all mobile hungry with taking film and photo and things like that and uploading. Huge.
There are endless opportunities.
Well, I was going to say there are, but I would suggest that probably there's 3 people left on at this point. Now we've overrun so much, and I can see
just
them.
us 3.
And it is still England and March, and we're running out of daylight.
Yeah, exactly.
All right.
So,
great.
All right. On that note, thank you.
Speak to you tomorrow.
Thanks all.
See you guys.
Cheers. Bye.
Bye bye.